or I should say soon-to-be ex-wife, had no idea about the car, and the reason why I got it for $1,000 is because he was going through a divorce, and he wanted to make sure that he didn't lose that chunk of a bit.
Okay, let's do this.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. This is the Vikings Garage. And today I'm going to answer a very complicated question to answer, at least for me. Could you tell me how many cars you've owned in your entire life? Well, as painful as the process as is going to be, I'm going to answer that same question today. Yeah, it's a lot of cars. Guys, I do want you to share in the comments section down below, how many cars have you owned? Do you remember how many cars have you actually had under your name? I know it took me a while, but without any further ado, let's get right to it. So in order for me to make this process a little easier, what I did is I divided it by brands, and that way it should be pretty simple. Towards the end, there are quite several oddballs that are going to be pretty interesting nonetheless, but hopefully this is not too boring for you guys, because if there's one thing I've realized after putting this list together is that I have not owned that many fancy cars, if you can call it that. These are all pretty standard four-cylinder bangers, if you will. There are some gems in here, so do please stay tuned. So without any further ado, Volkswagen. Let's start with Volkswagen. Why? Because my very first car was a 1988 Volkswagen Quattro. Yes, I know, super hard to even find them nowadays. I'm gonna put some pictures in here in the corner, but this is basically the only picture I have of this car. It's the car on this side right there. Terrible picture nonetheless. It was a car that I owned for a year, bought it for $1,500, yep. And I had it for about a year. Did absolutely nothing to it. The exhaust fell off, check engine light came on, and then there was some sort of issue with the transmission. Took it back to the same place, and they gave me exactly 10 times less, $150 for it. Left it there. Volkswagens. 1996 Volkswagen Golf. Yes, I've had one of these turds. This thing is, in my opinion, one of the slowest cars I've ever owned. Yes, it had some Barbette French brand of wheels on it that, in my opinion, were pretty cool, but that's about that. It was a 5-speed manual, but as far as I'm concerned, this thing was so slow that I lasted about a month with it, and I ended up trading it in for an Acura Integra, but we will get there. And then here comes the TDIs and all this other stuff. So the very first one that I had was a 2000 Golf TDI. That was a 2-door automatic, beautiful car, loved it. I had it for quite a while. There are some appearances of that car early on in my YouTube videos, and then at some point there I bought an 03 Golf TDI. This one was blue. It was a 4-door, and it was no, this was the correct transmission. This was a stick. So the 2-door was automatic. Please excuse me, guys. Believe me, this is very complicated. The first TDI, the black one, was 2-door automatic. The second one, the 03, was 4-door stick shift, so it was the correct transmission. And then I had back-to-back, which you guys also seen here in the channel, not one but 2 Jettas, both 04s, both GLSs. One was a TDI and the other one was not. The other one was just a regular GLS, fully loaded nonetheless, both burgundy, both automatic. Was not looking for neither one of those 2 cars. One bought it from a coworker. The other one, I ended up seeing it on my way to work, the commute. Stopped, inquired about it, and it turns out it was actually the lowest mileage Volkswagen I've ever owned. It used to belong to an older lady that had since passed, and long story short, out of that one, I owned it for almost 3 months, almost. I really didn't want to part ways with that car because it was so clean and so immaculate as far as service records go, one owner, you know, the whole shebang. And it was a fully loaded model. But where was I going with this? Yeah, it's not the car I was looking for, so I didn't really see the point on holding on to it without even trying. I did make a little bit of money on it. Made some content, didn't quite work out. But there you have it. These are my 6 Volkswagens that I own. So one down, next one. So this one is actually going to shock most of you. So a lot of you think, you know, I've been a Toyota guy through and through. Well, not quite. You see, before becoming a master technician at Toyota, I worked for Acura. I actually worked there for quite a while. I worked there for 8 years. And before even working for Acura, I had quite the track record as far as Acuras go. So, ready or not, I have owned 10 Acuras. Now, let's try to go through this as easy as possible because there's a lot of shockers here. Actually, the car that got me into liking cars was an Acura. I actually happen to have a picture of it right here in my hand. This was the car that started it all for me. This is 91 RS, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry, 92. Yes, it can get confusing. And check out those Altezza lights. Yeah, these younger kids are probably like, ooh, what are those things? Yeah, well, back then it was a thing. Same car, but with Giovanna wheels. Yeah, I know. Spent a lot of money on that car, but then it came to its demise by getting stolen. So that car was actually stolen from me. But it's aside the point. I'm not going to try to stress this video too much, but bear with me. Within the 10 Acuras, here we go. So I had a 92 GS. That one was red, and that one was the correct transmission. I actually believe this is the car in question. No, it's not. Forgive me. I told you guys this was going to be pretty bad because that's actually not a 92. So 92 GS red 5-speed. I had a 92 RS blue. That's the one we just spoke about. I had a very low mileage 91 GS 4-door in the most unusual color, gold, that I actually owned twice. That's right. I sold it to somebody and then they were trying to sell the car a year later and I bought it back. It was that clean. And then I also owned a burgundy 91 LS 5-speed. Yes, that would be this guy right here. And then you would think I would be done with Integras. No, the count is 4 so far if you've lost track on Integras alone. Then I had a 93 LS black 5-speed. I do have pictures of that one that I'll put up there. Ooh, I did save the best for last. I'm very proud to say I've had one of these. Although I'm pretty sure I owned the worst condition 92 GSR they probably ever seen. This one was in Aztec green, which is usually the color that most people want. This is a very limited production car, and as you guys can see from these pictures, I actually stole parts from another Integra that I had to put this one back together or closer to the better shape as possible. But that was to no use because that 92 GSR was actually under my ownership for about a year, and out of that year, I believe I put a whopping 3,000 miles on it. Not by choice. The original B17 the car came with was thirstier than your typical guy on a bar in a Friday. It was burning a lot of oil, so I, at the time, was fresh into the business, hired a master tech from Honda, and he did rebuilt on it. Car was still burning a quart of oil every week, so it was almost a blessing in disguise. Late night in somewhere south of the border, I was going a little too fast, and it spun a bearing. It completely destroyed the crank, and that was that. They were not available. Long story short, I did a B20 on it, Same guy helped me do it, and same guy over-torqued the head bolts, in which they snapped soon after. Anyways, I ended up selling that car for $500 to a coworker because I had nowhere to put it, and that's that. If I could, till this day, I would very much buy a DB2, which is 92 to 93 GSR. Definitely a car that I wish I could one day own again. Out of the Integras and into TSXs, I had an 04 blue TSX with the correct transmission, a manual, 6-speed. And I also had an 11 TSX Sport Wagon. That's right, I had a TSX wagon. Most people don't even know those cars exist. Mine was in black, not my favorite color. To be honest with you, I would buy it in the blue or perhaps even in Milano red. I think they're super cool. Milano red, super rare in a wagon form, but they do exist. Look them up. I just don't understand why Toyota couldn't put the interior black on those wagons instead of the hideous colors that they have, especially for the Milano red, which is like a beige color. I don't get that. And I think they do the same thing for the white wagons. Anyways, then, pretty cool car as well, an 07 TL Type S in white. This one was automatic. This car, I actually was part of a forum, and it was pretty popular because it was the highest mileage TL Type S in the country. And why that was? Because I couldn't afford to buy anything else, so I did buy that one. It was actually a pretty reliable car. I did modify it extensively, again, with factory parts, and it looked pretty cool at the end. Or at least I'd like to think so. Many years later, I ended up buying an 05 TL Gray, also with the correct transmission, a 6-speed. Very nice car as well. For those that don't know, these cars, when they come in the manual, they are paired up with Brembo brakes in the front. Super cool, super fun cars to drive, especially with the 6-speed manual transmission. And that wraps it up for Acura. Let's see what's next. All right, so now we're gonna get to the Hondas. I have had 5 Hondas. Yeah, that's right. Very first one, here we go. 95 Honda Accord LX Burgundy with an automatic transmission. Great car. I've put almost 50,000 miles on that car up until the point in which I got rear-ended on the parkway doing roughly 65 miles an hour, which is the speed limit. Lost control of the car, smashed into the barrier, and that was the end of that. The car was actually on fire when I walked away from it, after walking right back to it to grab my wallet. But my brother was by all means trying not to let me do that, but I did it anyways. It was a pretty, not a night that one wants to remember, but you know what? I'm done and over with. Hey, I found out that night that if you damage a sign on the parkway, you got to pay for it. It's pretty expensive too. Anyways, so I did own another Accord, and that was a 1988 Accord Silver. This thing had a manual transmission, and it also had a gazillion vacuum lines. This car, in a snowstorm, actually went to a little fender bender in which prevented the pop-up headlights from functioning, so I ended up junking the car. It was a great car nonetheless. I actually bought it from off of my brother because he got tired of it, I suppose. Then, here's a cool one, or at least I think it is. 02 Honda Civic SI. Yes, this is the one that has the shifter up here on the dash. Pretty cool car. EP3, if I'm not mistaken. Please forgive me if I'm butchering that. Did track the car quite a few times, and I have to say, quarter mile wise, after spending that much money, I was a little disappointed because I just about broke 15 seconds, and I was expecting something a little better than that. So I ended up getting tired of the car and I sold it. Go figure. I also had a 2010 Honda Civic EX, black car, beige interior. Wrong combination, especially for a mechanic like myself. But it had the 5-speed manual, so I'm very proud of that. That was a very good car. I'm not entirely sure why I ended up trading it in. Probably got sick of it because, you know, at the time I was going through a lot of cars, so that's that. And if you're keeping track, and I said 5, you probably guessed it and know what is the last one, because it is still sitting in my garage there. And that is my 2002 Honda S2000 in Sebring Silver. Yes, of course, it's a manual. Honda S2000 is only come in manual, as I'm sure you know. Super fun story about this car is that at the time, it was a deal that came up, unexpected, as all deals do. I did not have the money. For those of you that have seen the story, you know how much I paid for this car. It is something I'm very proud of. I'm not ashamed to say it, but I paid only $4,000 for the car. But when the deal came up, I only had $1,000 to my name. So within 2 weeks, I proceeded to sell my entire record collection. I had some very nice numbers in there, but I don't regret it because I very much enjoy driving the car, and every time I go to the garage, it's so strange. I like to stare at it, and I just love the lines on the Honda S2000. Not to mention, it's a super nice treat to have every so often take it out and just rip to the corners and try to stay out of trouble. So yeah, that's that. 5 Hondas right there. So was ready for Toyotas. All right, Toyotas. Now, some of you are going to be a little surprised with some of these names, but hey, listen. I'm a car guy, so every now and then I did get out of my comfort zone, and I actually got something cool for a change. So, ready or not, here we go. 1988 Toyota MR2. I actually do have some pictures of this car. Super funny story. I paid $1,000 for this car. The gentleman that sold me the car, I'm not afraid to say this on camera because who knows where he's at or what he's doing. But the car would be parked at his mother's house at all times. And his wife, or I should say soon-to-be ex-wife, had no idea about the car. And the reason why I got it for $1,000 is because he was going through a divorce and he wanted to make sure that he didn't lose that chunk of the bit. Yes, it's a little messed up on his part. But what I do remember about the car is that I had to, like I said, he was a carpenter. With the magnet, I spent quite a few afternoons taking nails out of the small little trunk that they have. This picture actually shows it very well. That section back there, that's actually a trunk. The other lid is for the engine. But that's beside the point. There was a lot of nails in the trunk. A little bit of rust here and there. But it was a fun car, manual transmission, not supercharged. It did have the top that came off. I thought that was super cool. Back then I was a young kid and it was a great car. Unfortunately, I had to part ways with that one when I went to the military in Portugal. I left it with my brother, which then proceeded to blow up the transmission and leave it at the gas station somewhere near where we used to live. The gentleman that owns the gas station till this day has restored the car and still has it. So every time I feel like looking at it, I drive by. It's no biggie. Next one is actually one of the oldest cars I have ever owned. 1987 Corolla, ready for this? FX16 in white, and yes, with the correct transmission. This car was a car that I actually picked up in a random car place. I thought it was a neat car, small. It seemed like it was going to be good on gas, and for a whopping $400, I got the car, put an exhaust in it, and drove it for about, I want to say 6 months before I completely blew the engine by driving it without coolant in a snowstorm. I did it. I honestly think if it was today, I would have done the same exact thing. There was no way I was going to stop there and wait for help. I made it home, and I'm pretty sure the engine blew up because I went there the next day and the crank was not moving. So that was the end of that car. Next car, another Corolla. So this is the second Corolla, 95. I had a 1995 Corolla in black. This thing was as basic gets. Automatic transmission, as I'm sure some of you know, it's a 4-speed, but that's all right. That car with 300,000 miles was averaging in the high 20s. I think that's super impressive for a car that I basically did absolutely nothing to it. Paid $500 for this car to a coworker of mine and drove it for a year and a half. After the year and a half, I needed to move on to something else. Gave it to my father, which then proceeded to drive it for another year. And the reason why we got rid of it at about 300,000 miles is because the fuel lines were completely rotted. It was leaking fuel on the floor, and upon assessing the situation, it was too much of a hassle, too much rust, too much rot. It was not worth fixing in my eyes, so that was the end of that car. Next Corolla is, which I did buy brand new, a 2014 Corolla S in white, automatic. I had this car for roughly 2 years, put 50,000 miles on it, and did absolutely nothing to it other than oil changes. It was a great car. I would highly recommend it. Every time I see one, it puts a smile on my face, because I did a lot of trips by myself on that car, and it was definitely, it was one of those cars, you know, that you look back and you're like, man, that car was nice. I never ever got stuck anywhere. It was averaging mid-30s to high 30s miles per gallon. Just great car, great car. Ooh, 5 Toyotas. I mean, I wonder if anybody's going to know the last one. 2015 4Runner Trail. That is my 5th 4Runner. And I'm not going to explain too much about it, because it's one of the main stars here of the channel. So you guys know this one very well. You know the story. Bought it used with 80,000 miles, and it now has just about another 100,000 on it. And it's been a great car. I could be here all day. We both delivered babies and brought them back home in that car after 2, 3, 4 days, whatever the case might have been. Starts every time. Safe car, great car, love it. I cannot say enough good things about a 4Runner. It is the best car I've ever owned, period. And what a great video to say that. I've had many cars, and nothing beats a 4Runner to me with my experience. But we're not done yet. Next up, Nissan. Okay, and as far as Nissans are concerned, this next one, I am very proud indeed to say that I had one. And why do I say that? Because these cars are very sought after nowadays. They were plagued with a little bit of rust, hence why mine ended up going away. But yes, you guessed it, that is a 1991 Nissan 240 SX. I bought this car from my brother, and as you can see there, yes, it is the correct transmission. And yes, this thing was, as far as I'm concerned, a beast. I have absolutely nothing wrong to say about that car. As I'm sure you guys know, they are rear-wheel drive. This car in particular, when my brother sold it to me, bought it for $1,000, yes. I paid $1,000 for a 240 SX. Good luck finding one that is drivable nowadays. Only issue the car had, the odometer had stopped working. So the mileage that were in the car were, I know for sure, not correct. It was a little tough with the oil changes, but I used to do them every 4 months or so. Other than the odometer, that was really it. The car was savage. I drove it when I worked for a medical company as a maintenance worker. Part of my job was to keep the facilities clean as far as snow is concerned. And why am I telling you this? I had to drive to this facility in the middle of a snowstorm at, I want to say 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And the highway was all mine. It was packed up with snow. And yes, I was driving this car in a snowstorm. I did have snow tires in the rear, but I am telling you, I have never had this much fun in my life in a car like that. It was so much fun, and I had absolutely no doubts I was going to get to work. Made it there, no problem. Beast of a car. Strut towers in the front started rusting, and the strut tower actually started coming through the hood. So I drove it to a junkyard with the engine literally at that point almost dragging on the floor, and that was the end of that. Great car. Beast. If I could ever find a clean one, hell yes, I would get my hands on one of those. Second car, super oddball. Don't ask me. I just, at the time, I know why I bought it. 05 Nissan Altima with a 2.5 liter engine. It's a big 4-cylinder, but this car in particular was paired up with a stick shift. So at the time, I think I was in a pickle to get a car, and I went to, I think it was a Honda dealer, and I happened to see this car, stick shift, and I said, why not? So I bought it just to get rear-ended 3 weeks later. I remember this because the car did not even have the plates yet. So there you have it, the two Nissans that I've had. Lexus. I have had one Lexus, and that was a 2001 IS300 automatic. Unfortunately, it was automatic. This one was blue. It was a very nice car. I still remember I traded in one of my Integras for it. Got it for a steal. I enjoyed the car, but after a while, for some weird reason, I wasn't too crazy about, one, the interior to me was super hard to clean. Inserts on those seats, or I'm not entirely sure if it's suede or Alcantara. It might be Alcantara. Somebody probably can correct that in the comments section, but it's just a car. After a year and a half, I kind of got tired of it, and I did sold it to buy the BMW. Oh, BMW is the one next. But if I had to say that IS300, they do make it with a stick shift. Boy, if anybody out there has an IS300 with a stick, do not sell that car. Talk about a sleeper. Super much? So yeah, and next comes the BMW. Yes, this one, I am very proud to admit that I had it. I actually do have some pictures of it. Boy, I am excited to share this one with you guys. Ready? 1999 BMW M3 in Istrial Blue. I believe that is the name of the color. I believe that is how you say it. This thing was a beast. 240 horsepower, man, out of that straight six. And what a balance this car has. What a beautiful car. Again, not to sound like a Debbie Downer. I mean, look at that rear end, man. What a nice car. Yeah, so this one was totally, not that there's such a thing as an expected accident, per se, but I literally babied this car. I love this thing so much, and I think ultimately that was what ended up biting me in the, took us. The car, I didn't have a garage at the time. I used to park it on the street. I would always look for the best parking possible for it, because I always had it in immaculate shape. Only used Mobil 1 gas. I've only used name brand parts. I mean, this was my baby. And unfortunately, in the spot in which I was parked, the neighbor across the street, literally the spot where it was parked, the neighbor's driveway was right across from it. And lo and behold, and out of all cars, it was a third generation 4Runner. The kids, somehow the parents left the car running. I guess they were running errands, and they ran inside the house. Kid gets inside the car's already running. He must be stepping on the brake, slams the car into reverse, and you see where I'm going with this. Rear ends that 4Runner right into the M3 and punches that M3 on top of the sidewalk. One wheel was like this. The quarter was completely smashed in. I did take it to a BMW dealer, but even after $10,000 worth of repairs, they did tell me that before they released the car, they said, listen, we did the best that we could. They showed me the printout for the alignment, but they did tell me, listen, the alignment on this car is never, ever going to come out 100%. Just be aware of that. So, knowing how much those rear tires cost at the time, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it was something like close to $400 a piece. Something like that. To me, it was... And it's one of those things. Somebody had already spoiled it for you. Funny enough, the gentleman that ended up buying the car, again, still owns it, loves it. Every so often when I come across him, which is not very often, I ask him, hey, are you going to sell it? And he just won't part ways with it. I don't blame him. Those cars now have skyrocketed in price, and I totally understand why. But all in all, it is worth all the hype. It's a very nice car, very fast, very strong. power band is steady throughout, and it's definitely one of those that I definitely get it back if I could. So this one is the only pickup truck in this entire list, and I am super proud to admit that I've had this. So the next one was a 1990 Mitsubishi Mighty Max. That's right, I had a Mighty Max. Now the reason why I actually bought this car, no joke, I bought this car because my father had another Mighty Max. He had a white one, and I happened to come across this truck from a mutual friend. And I remember looking at the truck and seeing so many parts that I had noticed that had been missing on my father's Mighty Max. So I said to myself, you know what? $500 for this truck? The guy claimed that the engine was no good. It wasn't true. It was overdue for an oil change. I put a little thicker oil in there and it was fine. So yeah, I bought a Mighty Max just to swap out some parts from that truck to my father's truck. And then I ended up selling it 2 months later. But yes, at some point there, I did have a pickup. So this next one, oh man, I'm going to get chewed up in the comment section. So I had a 2010 Hyundai Genesis Coupe. This was an R-Spec, 6-speed manual. It had Brembo brakes, all the works. If I'm not mistaken, this was the very first year for an R-Spec as far as Hyundai is concerned. Ah, boy. What do I got to say about that car? So, okay, I have to add, it was also the 4-cylinder turbo. They came available with a 6-cylinder, an R-Spec version only later on. But what can I tell you about this car? Now, guys, I'm not mocking on Hyundai. I'm just being honest with you here. Yes, I did buy a car that was very new. I probably should have waited it out if I really wanted to go down that route. I have no idea why I went down that route. But yes, I've had a Hyundai. After owning the car for roughly 1,000 miles, I had to take it to the dealer. The transmission had to be replaced. There was something metallic loose inside the transmission, so they had to replace the transmission. And then for its first oil change, at I think it was 3,500 miles or 30,000 miles, something weird like that, I got there and I proceeded to get out of the car and noticed that the headlights, I mean, mind you, I had noticed that my lighting during the day was a little funky. So I see the guy popping the headlights back down. And I say to him, yeah, I've noticed this before. What is going on with the headlights of this car? And he says to me, oh, this is very normal. They don't have a fix for this. Not to mention the interior on this car, at least for me, guys, nothing personal with the Hyundai owners out there, was just too flimsy, too plasticky, too loose. The quality wasn't there for me, man. And not even 6 months later, that was the end of that. I had to get rid of that car. That car just wasn't doing it for me. I was extremely unhappy. But I did buy it brand new, so there you have it. That's one of the very few cars I bought brand new, was a Hyundai. I know. There's a lot of cars on this list, right? So another oddball, we're almost there, guys, I promise, was a Plymouth Neon, 1995 to be precise. It came with the correct transmission. This was a manual transmission car. For those of you that don't know, this was basically a Dodge Neon, Plymouth, different badge. It had a pretty cool color. It was like this British green color looking thing. And I did basically buy this car off of my brother, another $500 car. He had it sitting on the street with a hole in the oil pan, and it leaked out all the oil. So what I did was I ended up buying a new oil pan, resealed it, and, you know, drove the car for, I honestly, I couldn't tell you. I don't know if it was 6 months or maybe less. But super fun story with that car is that I actually did take it to Englishtown. It's our local racetrack here, and did a few quarter-mile passes. And at the time, I was friends with this kid that had a car roughly, I believe it was a similar year car. It was a 95 Honda Accord. But the car that he had like the VTEC engine, but it was single overhead cam. Not entirely sure the power on that car, but I do remember vividly we did a few passes, and this guy beat me the very first pass. That was it. The following 2 passes, I beat him in the quarter mile with this little Plymouth Neon with a 5-speed manual. What a great car that was, man. Put very little money into it and then basically gave it away for the same exact price I paid for it. But I got absolutely nothing wrong to say about this car. Really neat little car. And of course, I had to save the best for last. And when I say best, I'm probably being very sarcastic, guys. Please excuse me, I don't mean to laugh. So, at some point there, for those of you that have watched a lot of my videos, you might have seen an Audi in there somewhere. Yes, I at some point thought it was a great idea to buy a 1997 Audi A6 Avant Quattro. I know, it's a lot to take in. Red. It was a red station wagon, automatic, with a 6-cylinder engine that I quite frankly believe was as slow as that Volkswagen Golf that I told you guys earlier about. I mean, without mocking the car too much, listen, guys, it was not the right A6 wagon to buy. There's much better ones out there. I just ended up buying that one because I actually thought with all the work that it needed, it would have made for good content. But honestly, after a little while, I realized that it was basically a money pit. And I did not want to proceed to continue to dump my money into it. So I did as many repairs as I possibly could to make it somewhat drivable. To be honest with you, at the end of the day, it still was not very much drivable because it did not matter what I did. The coolant light, temperature light, I should say, just was all out of whack. It would not move. Stuff was rotting away underneath. Not to mention, I have never ever experienced such a slow V6 ever. And it wasn't just that it was underpowered. I mean, I think this thing is rated at 170 something horsepower. It was the gas mileage. I mean, this thing was worse, way worse than a 4Runner is. And I mean by a lot. Needed a lot of work. Unfortunately, I was not the right person for it. I certainly hope the gentleman I sold it to is still trying to keep this car alive. More power to him. I threw in the towel with that one. And that's it, guys. This just about closes that chapter. In case you guys lost track by now, I have owned a total of 34 cars. Out of those 34 cars, 19 of them were manual. Are those my European roots? Perhaps. I do enjoy a manual car. Different strokes for different folks, I get it. As a daily driver, a manual at my age, not that I'm that old, but it might be a little much. Maybe something for the weekends, which I have. The S2000 is a manual. What did I want to say? So I did make this video because we are in the process, as I'm sure you guys know, to acquire another car for the channel. Please, for those of you that are giving up on me because of the 4Runner content, don't. Just trust me, I don't want to say too much. That content ain't going nowhere. I'm going to keep on giving you guys a lot of more tips. There's so much more to come. I still got plenty to share with you guys. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was nothing too special. I hope the background is neat. I just noticed that we got a little Cobra here in the background. Can you imagine if I actually would acquire one of these? That would have been super cool. Probably a replica because let's face it, the original ones are super, super expensive. But hey, you never know. You guys keep liking my videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the video and I'm sure we will get there. But I do want to know how many cars you guys have owned as well. I mean, you don't have to give me a super elaborate list. Maybe just a total number. Because I'm kind of wondering, am I alone on this? I've been driving now for 26 years. I've owned 34 cars. Is that a lot? And on that shocking bombshell, guys, I will catch you guys on the next one. I hope everybody's having a great day. And don't forget to enjoy your cars.